So that's a clip from the movie Exorcism of Emily Rose. Just by a show of hands, who's seen that movie? Oh, okay. Not many people. Maybe don't watch it then. It is a movie based on a true story about a woman who is possessed by a demon. And that's what we're talking about today. Angels, demons, exorcisms. So right away, there's probably some feelings like, oh my gosh, like what is going to be happening here? But we are committed that as we work through the story of Jesus and learn from Jesus, that anytime we bump into something, the next part of the story, we want to talk about it. So today we're looking at a passage of scripture where Jesus kicks out this demon from this person. And I'm sure that leaves us with lots of like, what the kind of feelings. So just, I don't know what you think about this, angels and demons and all that kind of stuff. But just turn to the person beside you and ask each other, do you believe in angels and demons? Just do it. Ask each other, find out where everyone stands. Just give a quick little survey here. Angels and demons, what do you think? I don't know. For some people, right away, I guess we can kind of break it down. We can probably break it down into a number of categories. There's some people who, in your belief, in your worldview, the idea of there being a spiritual realm and an element where there's maybe angels and demons, good and evil, maybe that's just part of your worldview and you're totally comfortable with that. So when we look at this passage from Luke chapter 4, it just kind of flows. You take it at face value. It doesn't really faze you too much. So some of us are probably in that spot. There's some of us who are probably, I think it's fair to say that we love the idea of spirituality. Even our culture loves the idea of the spiritual, as long as the spiritual is attached to like good things, love and peace and hope. So we're all spiritual beings is an easy thing maybe to embrace. Yeah, we're all spiritual when it's attached to a good thing. But if the conversation around the spiritual world tips to the other side where it becomes about darkness and evil, demons, then maybe that's where we're like, oh, I don't know, I'm not too sure. Maybe that's fair that some of you are kind of in that place. You love the idea of the good side of maybe we're all spiritual, but the other side maybe feels a little bit, you're not too sure. And then there's people outright that whenever we talk about any of this stuff, it just feels so far-fetched. It feels like a sci-fi episode. It feels like a movie that is fun for entertainment purposes, or maybe that movie's not your idea of fun for entertainment purposes. It is a really good movie. Can I just say, it was a really great movie, I thought, because I kind of like those movies, but then Aaron Matos told me that it really, really upset him. So I don't know where you land on that spectrum, but anyways. So you think it's okay to talk about and maybe to watch a movie about, but you just don't really have any time for it. You're like, nah, I don't believe in any of this stuff. And that maybe tips into your perspective of Jesus. It's okay to talk about Jesus as a teacher, someone who's around, you had good things to say, but as soon as we start talking about Jesus being more than just a person who is around, a teacher, a rabbi, for you, that's your checkoff point. That's when you kind of like, oh, I'm not sure. So we do recognize, and I think it's good to give freedom that in this room with this many people, as soon as we start talking about angels and demons and a spiritual realm, that it's okay to say we're all in different places and there's room for all of us. It's okay to not be sure. It's okay as we have this conversation to maybe wonder, I'm not sure, have lingering questions. We are not going to solve everything this morning. We're not. So if this sparks more questions that I can't address, and I certainly don't have all the answers, it's an ongoing conversation. So I just want to say that. But grab your Bibles. We're going to be looking at Luke chapter 4, kind of continuing this conversation. Let me just set it up this way. Since we use this clip from this thriller or horror movie, let's talk about, just to set up the conversation, let's talk about the gospel in terms of a horror movie with a happy ending. Okay? Let's just think about it through this lens for this morning. So the gospel comes from this Greek word euangelion, which basically means good news, proclamation. It's this announcement of something new. So whenever we read in Scripture that Jesus comes announcing the kingdom or shares the gospel, it's about this good news message. So let's think about the gospel in terms of a horror movie with a happy ending. So just think about, maybe you don't watch a lot of horror movies, but let's just think about kind of the story arc of a horror movie. So most movies, they trick you, right? It's like the first 5 or 10 minutes, it's like perfect, right? And you're like, this is not going to be scary at all because it just feels so great. It's like this. It's like this family is going on this beautiful road trip. There's beautiful scenery. There's a movie that tips into this storyline. If you want to know what it is, I'll tell you. So there's this family. They're just enjoying it. They're out. Everything's great. They're going to create memories, have this family vacation. It's been something they've been looking forward to. Everything is like perfect, peaceful, hopeful, and happy. And then in every storyline, it takes a turn. And I have a good picture here, I think. It's like when you watch those movies, you know when there's like the door to the basement and like they just have to go down and every part of you is like screaming like, no, don't be an idiot. Do not go down those steps. Are you crazy? But this perfect family vacation, maybe they have a car accident, maybe they run out of gas, the engine overheats in those old Volkswagens, it's definitely going to happen. Something happens and they find themselves in a place they never imagined and things start to spiral. Maybe some strange things start happening and all of a sudden it's more than just strange. It feels dark, it feels evil, it feels sinister, everything goes wrong. Now what was once peaceful and hopeful and perfect family relationship is now getting destroyed and messed up, fractured, and it just feels hopeless. And then we enter the stage of the movie or the story where it feels like death is staring them in the face and there is absolutely no way out. This is the only place it goes, is just going to end. And almost when you're watching those movies, if you do, or you read like a really kind of a dark novel where it's like, this is the moment where it feels, you almost are hoping for them that it would just end. The situation is so bad, it feels like death is a better alternative to life. Just get this over with, I just want it to be done. If you're watching the movie with the friends, you secretly wish you could fast forward, but you don't because you want to pretend like it's not a big deal, but you're all thinking the same thing in the room. It's that feeling like this can't get any worse, it's done. Any sense of hope is gone, any sense of life is gone, it's just the end. And then in every story like this, there's this hero moment where someone inserts themselves. It's one of the key characters. It's a character that hasn't really been introduced very much, and all of a sudden they're on the scene, and they take the role of a hero. They are the ones who insert themselves into the darkness in order to bring hope and resolution. They're willing to sacrifice themselves, to give themselves. They're motivated by a deep sense of love. Sometimes it's the strong paternal character who will do anything for their kids in a movie. They'll be willing to sacrifice even their life for their kids. It's that element where there's this moment of crisis, conflict, where good and evil match up, and it's going to be this big, what's going to happen, and good wins. And then we have, at the end of any movie like this, you feel happy again, kind of, because it's like, oh, good, like, good one. But then as most movies trail out, there's still this lingering sense of, there's still something there, and we still bear the scars of what happened, and there's something that's still kind of rippling on us, but there is new life and new hope and opportunity, but it's not fully realized. It's like we've tasted that everything's going to be okay, but we don't have it in full. It's not fully realized. And so in this story that we're looking at, Jesus is coming in a heroic moment, inserting himself into the story, right at a place where everything seems dark and desperate and like there's no hope. The Jewish people are completely lost. They're scattered. They're under Roman occupation. It almost feels like it can't get any worse, and they've been longing for a long time for this hero. This hero has not shown up. They've been waiting and waiting, and now Jesus is the hero inserting himself into the story to battle good and evil and to take it on head on. And so that's kind of this idea. This gospel is good news. Is Jesus inserting himself into the story right when it feels the bleakest, the darkest, the time when there's no hope. So all that ramble to get ourselves into this idea. Let me just say this too. The Apostle Paul, when he's writing about this idea of a spiritual reality, he says this in Ephesians chapter 6. We'll have it here for you. It says, "For we are not fighting against flesh and blood enemies, but against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in this dark world, and against evil spirits in the heavenly places." So even that conversation, even those few words there, it may tip you into saying, wait a second, we're not fighting against flesh and blood enemies. Aren't our struggles fully the things that we can see and that are in front of us? Is there something else going on? Is there a whole other realm and dimension? And according to the Christian worldview, we would say, absolutely. There's something more that is happening here that we can see. And as we'll see as we're getting through, this is a story that has a happy ending, but it can sometimes feel hopeless. But let's just walk through. Here's where Jesus shows up. Luke chapter 4, verse 32. And here's where we're going to just kind of take on this whole idea of a demon and possession head on. And what's happening is Jesus is inserting himself into the story. Beginning at verse 31. It will be up on the screen for you. It says, then he, meaning Jesus, went to Capernaum, a town in Galilee, and on the Sabbath he taught the people. They were amazed at his teaching because his words had authority. Remember, for the last number of weeks we've been saying that one of the markers of Jesus and his ministry as he's kind of coming out as this teacher in his role is that everyone's noticing this authority that he has, the way he teaches, the way he instructs people. People are noticing this and people are paying attention. He's teaching as one who has authority. Verse 33, in the synagogue, there was a man possessed by a demon, an impure spirit. He cried out at the top of his voice, "Go away! What do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." So again, the synagogue, the central place for Jewish culture and worship, where the community would gather. It made sense that everyone was there. It makes sense that was the place Jesus would teach. He'd show up and travel kind of in his speaking tour, and he'd be there teaching. And all of a sudden, when he's in this place, this man who is possessed by this demon, recognizing Jesus, hey, I know who Jesus is. You're Jesus of Nazareth. He knows who he is on a human level, but he also tips into, and I also know that there's something more to you. You are the Holy One of God. Kind of calls it straight out. Verse 35, be quiet, Jesus said sternly. Come out of him. Then the demon threw the man down before them all and came out without injuring him, without injuring the man. So Jesus kind of stops him in his tracks and orders this demon out of this man. So exorcism in the first century context was a normal thing for people, more normal than it probably is for us. So it can still feel, like we said at the beginning, like strange, foreign, not sure, hokey, superstitious. But in a first century context, there were kind of religious Jewish leaders who were known as exorcists. They would be involved in helping provide healing and deliverance for people who felt like they had a sense of an evil spirit attached to them or troubling them or burdening them. As we read, if you read through the other gospel accounts, and we'll stumble into it as we keep working through the story of Jesus, there's multiple occasions where Jesus cast demons out of people. In the life of the early church, through the book of Acts, we see this as well. Josephus, who's a historian, he looks back on the life of the nation of Israel, and he recounts different people who were involved in this kind of deliverance ministry, bringing healing. And so, as weird as it may hit us right now at film.ca, this was something that they were not unfamiliar with, although it's still crazy, right? But not so unfamiliar that they've never heard of it or thought of it before. So when I was reading this and thinking about this, this is totally going to date me, and I keep doing these things that date me, but that's okay, and some of you won't even know the song, but I immediately thought of this one song that I felt like as Jesus is showing up and he's teaching, it's like this moment where he's going to take control and authority and demonstrate his power. So there's this song that came out in 1990, and I know some of you weren't even born then. That's a different conversation, but let me just play this clip of this song by Snap. So some of you know it. Can we just crank that up? If it comes out here. Go to like 1 minute and 10 seconds in the song, Sai. If you can hit it around there. So that's like so pointless, other than I feel like Jesus shows up at the synagogue, this demon-possessed man shows up, and Jesus is like, I've got the power! Right? Now anytime you're going to hear that song, you're going to think about demon possession. You're welcome. There you go. So he shows up. This man knows who Jesus is. You're Jesus of Nazareth. This demon does, and says you're the Holy One of God, attributing to Jesus not just a human attribute and lineage, but also something much greater. And Jesus commands this demon out. It's interesting, when Jesus has the power, N.T. Wright, in one of his works, says it this way: he didn't have to summon up a stronger powers than his own. He just used the authority he already possessed in himself. And as this passage makes clear, he did the same with ordinary diseases as well, like the raging fever of Simon's mother-in-law. We're going to get to that, the Simon's mother-in-law passage. We're not quite there yet. But the whole thing is, like, Jesus had in his possession, under his control and authority, everything he needed in order to take control of the situation and move into the spiritual realm and command what shouldn't be there away from what it was possessing. He had everything. He didn't need to summon. He didn't need to go through any conjuring. He didn't need to have like any, if you just say this thing like 12 times and do this and that, this ritual, then it'll be okay. He had everything he needed, all the power and the authority. Remember, He's got the power. So then, verse 36, all the people were amazed and said to each other, what words these are. With authority and power, he gives orders to the impure spirits, and they come out. So they're amazed at the authority with which he teaches, and they're also amazed now that Jesus has the ability to speak into the spiritual realm and make commands, and whatever is there immediately does what he says. And again, 37, and news about him spread throughout the surrounding area. Of course, right? There's healings, miracles, there's teaching with authority, and then there's the guy who kicks out evil spirits, and that word is going to get around, right? Of course, word's going to spread. Jesus then left the synagogue and went to the home of Simon. Now Simon's mother-in-law was suffering from a high fever, and they asked Jesus to help her. So he bent over her and rebuked the fever, and it left her. She got up at once and began to wait on them. So 1 minute, Jesus is commanding this demonic presence in the spiritual realm away from the person it's possessing, it's oppressing. And the next minute, he's with Simon and Simon's mother-in-law. She's suffering physically. She has this ridiculous fever, and he uses his words again to command illness away from her. And then she gets up, good as day, and begins to serve and wait on them. She obviously had the gift of hospitality, and now that she's better, she's going to get going. At sunset, the people brought to Jesus all who had various kinds of sickness. And laying his hands on each one, he healed them. Moreover, demons came out of many people, shouting, "You are the Son of God." But he rebuked them and would not allow them to speak because they knew he was the Messiah. So clearly, word gets out, and everyone is like, we got to bring, if you're sick, if you've been acting crazy, if something's gone on here, we're getting you to Jesus right now. And all of a sudden, there's this influx of people. Now, this is going to be a really weird connection, but it just hit me this week. So Bobby and I forget we were driving, we saw one of those, this is really terrible to connect this with Jesus, but a knife sharpening truck, right? Those things are from like a bygone era. But there was this truck that was driving along, and I guess, it used to be that they drive through neighborhoods and you'd bring out your dull knives and the guy would pull over. It's like the ice cream guy for adults, right? They bring out their knives and they get them all sharpened up. It's kind of creepy too, kind of strange, but they get all their knives sharpened up and you'd pay this person to do it. And he would just make his way through the area and everyone would come. Everyone would be flocking like, oh, my knife's been dull for so long, I gotta go. Oh, good, here comes the sharpening guy. So in this situation, I feel like this word is spread. Jesus doesn't have like a song that's playing as he's going through the neighborhood. There's no like flashing lights. But everyone knows what's going on, and everyone brings the things that are broken and messed up and not the way they should be to Jesus. And as he lays his hands on them, as he speaks with authority, he heals them, he casts out demons, and he makes things that were once messed up and felt like they had no hope to become places of new life and new hope and new opportunity. It's fascinating. And notice again, as the demons are coming out of these other people, they're shouting and declaring that Jesus is the Messiah, but he wants to keep them quiet. Because in his timeline, he doesn't want this to spread too quickly and too fast. He wants to kind of keep that on the down low a little bit, because he knows that there's already going to be enough trouble with the religious establishment as he's unfolding this new way of teaching, this kingdom, this idea. And so even though the demons know exactly who Jesus is, and the fact that he can kick them out shows the authority and power he has, he wants them to be quiet. He's not looking for more fame. He's not wanting more people just to shout, tell more people. He's trying to keep it quiet in that moment. Okay, that's our snapshot. So let's talk. Let's hear from each other. If you're new or visiting, we'd love to take a little bit of time just to circle up and talk together. Can I just encourage us that maybe you need to stand up and turn around. Maybe someone is sitting by themselves. Please include them in your group. But just talk about this part of the story, about questions it raises, ideas, insights you may have that we all may need to learn. Just take about 5 minutes and talk together. If this makes you really uncomfortable, you can do something else or go on your phone or go to the washroom, grab a coffee. But take a few minutes because we want to hear what jumps out for you, what stirs, because we believe God is speaking to us all together as a collective community. So stand up, turn around, meet people, invite people into your circles. If it's small, make it bigger. And then we're going to hear from each other a little bit, okay? Take 5 minutes, go for it. I'm going to call you back together. Let's take a couple minutes and hear some thoughts or ideas. Things that jump out. Obviously, as we continue this conversation about Jesus, more and more things are unfolding and new situations and new scenarios, and we're learning more about Jesus all the time as we continue to follow him in a kind of a chronological way, and he's kind of growing in his influence. But what were some of the things in this section that you guys were chatting about or thinking about? share some thoughts. Yes. Yeah, Finn.
Why is there like less possession now than like before?
Yeah. So the question is, why is there less possession now than it seems like there was before? A really interesting thing about, as we read through Scripture, is that there is a definite spike in occurrences of possession and deliverance kind of ministry in the Gospels. So it's not that it wasn't present before, but it spikes in the Gospels in Jesus' ministry, and then it's present in a lesser degree in the life of the early church, and then at least in the writings, it kind of disappears a little bit. So one of the things I think it's fair to say is there's a difference between, at least when we're reading, let me just start with Scripture. There's a difference between when we're reading Scripture and it feels like something's prominent or something's not present. Does not necessarily mean it's there or not there. That it is a part of it. It's always been a part of it. It's just the focus it gets in certain situations is different. So for today, when we would say, why does it seem like we don't deal with this at all? I appreciate in the clip, one of the things the clip said in a really subtle way is that maybe we have just thought our way out of believing that this stuff still occurs. So if that's the case, so there would be different parts of the church, different groups. I have friends who are involved in what they call deliverance ministry, who would be very active and involved in this kind of thing. Where now, let me just stop there for a second. I think it's really, really important to discern the difference between something that might be a mental health condition and something that might be a spiritual condition. And so whenever someone comes looking for help and wants to have a conversation, I think it really takes a lot of work and discernment and wisdom to know, is this something that, it's actually a medical condition, and we've come so far that way, that some things that used to be attributed, say in the church in the medieval era would attribute everything to a spiritual cause and force, and it just wasn't the case. So now I think part is discernment. What is what? Is it a physical thing that we need to have medical intervention, psychological intervention, some drugs to help with this, or is this really a spiritual thing? So Finn, the short answer is it still happens. It's still present. We sometimes don't pay attention to it. It is around us. It's something for us as a church to be aware of. It's also not something that needs to hijack and take over everything that we do and all of our thoughts. The risk when you talk about these things is sometimes certain personalities or certain people have proclivity to run the gamut on this and go so far that if anything isn't working or something doesn't work out or something goes wrong, everything is an attack, everything's an issue, and it's a spiritual oppression. And I would say that I don't think that's true. But I'd also say we sometimes tip to the other side and we never talk about it because we don't know what to do with it sometimes, and so it feels other and weird, and so we avoid it altogether. And I'm just saying it's important for us to pay attention to. So it does happen. It continues to happen. I know people, it's not my gift. Discernment on this level is not my thing, not my gift. But I know and have great friends, and I know they're involved in it on a weekly basis. And so it does still happen, and it is still present. And I think what Paul says in there in Ephesians 6, I think our battle, very much we try to say, our battle is, we try to limit our struggle on a spiritual level to only what we can see and pay attention to and quantify with our senses, and I think there's much more for us to be aware of, and that there is a spiritual battle that takes place. And the Bible paints that picture, and I think it's still the case for us now. In the happy ending horror movie, we're in that zone where the rescue has happened, but we still bear the scars and the marks of the past because we haven't fully realized the happy final ending. And some of those battles and scars and things that happen continue to happen on a spiritual level too. Because we'd say the enemy is not content to say Jesus reigns and rules and God is good, wants to do everything it can to thwart. We'll talk about that in a second. I have a few points that we'll come to, but that's an awesome question, Finn. What else? What else were you talking about? Yeah.
Can you maybe just clarify or speak to the spiritual condition of somebody who has the susceptibility to be possessed and a born-again believer?
Yes.
And how, if that could happen to a believer, if there's absolutely no way that could happen because we're sealed in Christ,
Yeah, so, okay, that's great. Really great question. There is be a wide range of thought on this one. So let me just say, let's start with saying that there's a thought that light and darkness can't occupy the same space at the same time. So when you turn a light in the dark room, now if it's light, it's no longer dark. So some people would say, if you've already chosen to follow Jesus, then that space is sealed. There's no room for the enemy to come in. There's no room for oppression or possession, maybe is a better word in this instance, to say the enemy cannot take up space that already belongs to Jesus. I think it's also fair to say that we live in a daily place of choice and free will, and there is always opportunity for us to say yes to something and no to other things, and sometimes we mix those around what's best for us. And so I would say, I think it is possible for someone who has said, yeah, this is Matt Vincent speaking, on my opinion, not on behalf of the whole global church. I think it's possible for someone who has said yes to Jesus to start dabbling and entertaining the idea of outside spiritual influences being present and involved in their life. I think that is possible. I don't think that's about possession, because I do think that space is Jesus's, but I think it is possible to start flirting and entertaining in the wrong direction. Other people would disagree with that. But I do think we talk about free will, and I do think we all have the ability to move in directions all the time. And I think there's the ability to say yes and move in a direction, or to say no to Jesus and move in another direction. And so it is something I think it's part of it's part of discipleship for me in terms of the spiritual realm and warfare, to say I am on track with Jesus daily, saying yes and moving in that direction, and protecting ourselves from influences and the potential from being influenced from something that is an attack of the enemy, to say. I'm trying not to use too weird spiritual warfare language, but it's hard to not speak in those terms. But so that's what I'd say. I think possession is still possible and still does happen. I also think there is potential for someone who said yes to Jesus to head in a wrong direction over a course of time. And so I would have friends who are involved in deliverance ministry who are helping Christians who have followed Jesus, who have somehow allowed there to be an opening into their life that something has become attached and is causing them ongoing problem and struggle. I'm going to skip ahead here. So let's just we won't end this, but on slide number 1, or the thought number 1, can you just bring that up for a second, just because it makes sense? I don't know what I called it, like thought number 1 or idea number 1, or is it down there? Yeah. So when we think about the demonic, about demons, so we would say in a really kind of elementary way, spiritual beings that seem to want to wreak havoc on human beings. As we read through the Gospels and life of the early church, demonic activity, they seem to want to wreak havoc in the life of people, to mess things up, to make things go the way they weren't intended, to thwart any potential for relationship between human beings and Jesus, to just continue to cause problems and mess things up, and they're masters of this. This is kind of their role. So we can just leave that up for a second. So yeah, Danielle, in your thought, that people who said yes to Jesus somehow have made moves that probably haven't been good, and have opened themselves up to the potential for spiritual attachment or attack. And they're looking for help to find freedom and release from that. Yeah. I'm not the expert on, I just should have said it off the top, I'm not the expert on this. I learn way more from people that I hang around with. I started this conversation when I started my MDiv at McMaster. I remember I took a course on spiritual warfare, and I went into it feeling like, I don't know. And then we had some personal experience, which is another conversation for later, for around the table. And now I'm just like, it's real, it happens. I just don't understand it all, I think is where I'm kind of at. What else? What were some of the other things you were talking about? There was a hand somewhere on this side, I think. Did you guys have something? Okay. Yes. Let's have one more person. One more thought. Heather.
So I know that everybody's an individual and we all have our own spiritual walks, but is there a conversation around like safe lines? Like, you know, we talk about like Ouija boards or movies or I have not seen that movie.
Yeah.
Clearly. So, but are there lines that people shouldn't cross, or are we talking like how to broach those subjects?
Oh man, yeah. Yes. Yes, there's lines you shouldn't cross. Okay, from personal experience, I grew up in a family that's pretty conservative and pretty strict on stuff. And so the idea of even watching movies or listening to music, my parents would say, would be something that would potentially open you up for attack. So that was kind of where my family had the line. I'm not sure I would say that, but I think there are, oh man, I don't know how to say it in a general way. I do think there are certain things. Okay, well, you brought up a Ouija board. I think that's a good example. I would say a Ouija board is its specific intent and purpose is to try to get in touch with something in the spiritual dimension. Its whole existence is to have fun and make it a game. The fact that it's sold in a game aisle at a store, the whole point of the game, no matter what you think is happening in that game, is to kind of tap into something other than yourself. I think that is really, really dangerous. And it's not a game. There would be people who would disagree with what I just said and said, it's no big deal. And I would say my line is just in a different place than theirs. But I do think, and we can talk more about it if you have more specific questions. And I don't know if I have the answers, but I do think there is a place where we start dabbling and opening ourselves up to something, because it's almost as we operate with what we can see, almost not really believing that the other is in existence. We don't really believe there's a spiritual battle happening, and so we kind of act frivolous here and now. And I think that's naive, and it's wrong, and it's dangerous. So, man, I feel like it's gotten really heavy all of a sudden. No more jokey reunion. Okay, let me just share a couple ideas, because I know our time is rolling. But this is an important conversation to start. This is not opening and closing chapter. This is to start. Can I just speak a little bit about this authority? We've been talking about this for the last number of weeks. When Jesus teaches, he teaches with authority. And I think there's something to this for us to kind of pause on. So in a teaching way, people were like marveling with Jesus' authority, with the way he taught. An interesting thing about this context is that authority and original thought was not something that any of these rabbis or teachers were striving for. You didn't want to be known as the rabbi who had the brand new take on interpretation of Scripture. That was not the goal. Sometimes I feel like there's a lot of pressure now in the church where you have to come up with new things all the time. This was never a part of their conversation. It was never to come up with a novel idea. In fact, they kind of, I think they kind of felt like they were being successful if they could attribute every single thought they had and tell you where it came from. There was almost like, no, this isn't my own thought. This came from this person and this person and this person and this person from hundreds of years ago. There was no pressure to come up and be original, to come up with your own thoughts. It was, you were kind of building on the backs of other thinkers and intellectuals, and that was a good thing. You were never trying to compete or come up with something new. So much so that I found this quote. It says, from a rabbi, he says, "Nor have I ever in my life said a thing which I did not hear from my teachers." It's like nothing's new here. Everything comes from someone else. So when Jesus comes on the scene and he teaches us someone with authority, it is so different. It is so outside of their paradigm, because Jesus is teaching and leading a whole new way. And that's partly why it stood out so much, is he wasn't trying to attribute it back to someone else. He was speaking in such a way that he's like, actually, we're wiping all this and starting fresh and new, and this is a brand new thing. And the awesome thing about that, as we see in this account in Luke 4, is that even the demons knew that. Even the demons recognized the authority and that something big and new was happening. So whether people would want to acknowledge it or not, even the demonic on the spiritual level would know, wait a second, something big is going on here. Erickson, in his commentary, Christian Theology, says this: "The Bible makes clear that a serious and intense struggle is going on between, on one side, Christ and his followers, and on the other side, Satan and his forces." I don't want to harp about this, but a number of weeks ago we looked at when Jesus was teaching at the beginning of Luke chapter 4 in the synagogue, and he's standing up and he reads from the prophet Isaiah. Do you remember the words he says? They have deeper meaning every time we come back to them. It says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim the captives will be released, the blind will see, and the oppressed will be set free. And that the time of the Lord's favor has come." He's the hero who's inserting himself into the dark moment to bring new life and hope and take on the spiritual enemy. So a couple takeaway points. Demons, spiritual beings that seem to want to wreak havoc and manipulate human beings from the inside out. Seems like their goal is to take up space and residence in a place they don't rightly deserve, and to cause havoc and wreck relationships and destroy. And as you read through different gospel accounts, you'll see that. The second thing that I want to point out is whenever they come face to face with Jesus, they have no power. Every instance where Jesus comes in front of someone who is possessed by a demon, the demon holds no authority and no power. It's not like, who's going to win this one? It's like not even close. It's like me getting in the ring back in the day with Mike Tyson and hoping I would have any there's just zero. Like there is no opportunity. Colossians chapter 2:15, it says, in the same way he disarmed the spiritual rulers and authorities. He shamed them publicly by his victory over them on the cross. That everything Jesus came to inaugurate, there is no contest. Anytime Jesus comes face to face with opposition, spiritual opposition, there is no contest. They have no power. Which spills into number 3, Jesus wins. Hebrews 2 says, because God's children are human beings made of flesh and blood, the Son also became flesh and blood. For only as a human being could he die, and only by dying could he break the power of the devil who had the power of death. Only in this way could he set free all who have lived their lives as slaves to the fear of dying. And 1 John 4, he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. This whole thing, this whole challenge where Jesus inserts himself as the hero into the story, into the gospel good news story, is that he has power and authority and Jesus wins. Through his death on the cross and through his resurrection, he dismantles any power, any authority, any strength that the enemy has. This grip of death is just obliterated, and Jesus makes the way possible. And so we could say, yes, we still bear the marks and the stains and some of the scars of our past and our brokenness and our sin and what we've gone through. The hope and where we're headed is known, and that Jesus wins. And sometimes when we have these conversations, I mentioned it before, we can tip into the side of feeling like there's something going on everywhere and we become paranoid. And when that happens, the problem is we forget that Jesus wins. We forget that Jesus has authority, that Jesus has already done everything that's needed. One of the things that over the last 3 or 4 years with people that I'm in kind of good friendship with, beyond just like chit-chat, but if we're out for coffee or a meal and people who have either said, hey, can you kind of speak into our life in a mentoring way, or people who we've just known each other long enough that we're through all the surface stuff. One of the ways I love to cut right to the chase in those conversations is I ask the question, how's your soul? I just say, how's your soul? And it's kind of a ridiculous statement or question. But really what I'm trying to say is what is really going on underneath it all? Because we can talk about this and that, and those are all really, really good things. But if I say that your center and your purpose and your identity all stems from your relationship with Jesus or your pursuit and understanding of the spiritual, I want to talk about those things. That's what I really love to talk about. And so the question, how's your soul, has been my way of transitioning. Maybe I've done it to you. I don't know if we've ever hung out. And so while we're not one-on-one here and we're a big group, I think it's an appropriate question when we think of all this topic, this idea. Jesus' authority and power, what he came to do, what he came to inaugurate and start this kingdom, is to get you to consider, so where am I at? So where are you at? And how is your soul, I would say? How are you doing? Where are you at with all this? We love as a church to create lots of easy places for conversation and entry points into the exploration of Jesus. And some of you are just in that place where you're just like, I am just trying to check this stuff out. I had no idea today we're talking about demons. I probably would have slept in. I don't know. Maybe that's your thing today. But you're still kind of checking it all and wondering, and that's a wonderful thing. And I say this often, I would just encourage you that as we take a minute coming up just to be quiet, just to pray again. God, if you're real, would you just reveal yourself to me? If there is such a thing as a spiritual realm, if there is, Jesus, if you were more than just this really cool teacher a long time ago, can you help me understand what that looks like? Would you break through and show me that? And that's a really legitimate, beautiful prayer. There's others who would say, you know what? I believe in Jesus, but this whole conversation, it really pushes a button for me, or I struggle with it. Or it feels like I'm on that family road trip and the car's broken down and we're stuck in the desert. And the idea, I believe that the rescue happened maybe at some point, but it doesn't feel like that's real to me right now. And so when I say to you, how's your soul? You're saying, I'm in a really kind of dry and desperate and lonely place. And I encourage you in our quiet time just to pray and admit that, God, I need you to show up in a way again and remind me that you have won. Can you remind me that yours has already been the victory? Because it doesn't feel like that right now. And that is a beautiful and legitimate prayer. And then others are like, man, I am clicking on all cylinders, we're kicking butt. God is alive and vibrant. My spiritual life has gone from black and white to full color. It's like everything is popping. It's like so many things are happening. And your prayer then when I say, how's your soul? You say, man, I just want to celebrate. I want to sing. I want to worship. I can't believe people aren't more excited in here. What's the matter with people? I can't wait to tell more people about Jesus. You're on that end of the spectrum. And so when I say, how's your soul? You're like, it's amazing. God is so good. I can't wait to tell other people. And so when you're quiet, you just want to just say, God, thank you. And you're just like over brimming with like excitement, enthusiasm, and worship for how God has met you and brought new life and has revealed himself to you. But the beauty is that we're all in different places and it's all okay. And God knows all of that all at the same time. So as we all pray, it's all good and it's all safe space. But how is your soul? Do you believe that Jesus is the one who has provided the way for new life? That on a spiritual level, that there's something more that we can see that is happening and that has happened and will happen that Jesus is inviting us to be a part of? So wherever you're at, if I can help, have conversations, answer questions, share some of my experience, I'm here, but I want to give you a minute just to be quiet. And then after we're done being quiet, I'm going to pray, and then we're going to have communion together. And this is a beautiful thing. This is a reminder of Jesus' death and resurrection, his victory, our identity and hope we have. And so as Drew and the team lead us, as we sing, as we just declare who God is, come and rip a piece of bread and drink, dip it in the juice and eat and drink it and taste it. And remind yourselves, just let it be our weekly ongoing reminder that we're a part of something much bigger that sometimes we don't know all about, but we have faith and we trust that Jesus has victory and is inviting us into partnership and relationship. So be quiet for a minute, and then I'll pray, and maybe the band can even come right now, and we'll be ready to sing and to take communion. Jesus, thanks for moments of quiet. Thank you for the unfolding story of Scripture. And each time we come up against the next little chunk of the story, it teaches us and challenges us and maybe freaks us out. This conversation can be strange and foreign to some people or feel familiar or maybe something that we don't really think a lot about. And so in an appropriate way, we want to say, God, what are you saying to us right now? What are you speaking, and what are you trying to impress on us? God, we believe that there's much more happening around us than we can see and that we're aware of. And we don't want that to lead us into a place of fear or trepidation. We want it to propel us into a place of confidence in who you are. Our confidence is not in what we can do and what we're about and our success. Our confidence, Jesus, is solely in you, in your power, in your authority, in your victory. Thank you that in the face of evil and death and darkness, that you stand and you speak and it all falls apart. Jesus, thank you for your death and resurrection. Thank you for your love that compelled you to give yourself, to insert yourself into our story, even though it wasn't your problem, that you provided the way. Thank you for the rescue and the hope and the identity. Jesus, meet people where they're at right now. Thank you for that marvelous mystery of how you're present with each of us individually and collectively as a church leading us. And it's hard to get our minds around, but God, through your Spirit, speak to people here. Draw those who are doubting and struggling and wrestling with this whole idea of there being a God, those people who are in dark or desperate or dry places, water their soul. Give them new life and new hope. Remind them of your presence with them. And those who are kind of on the other extreme, help them to be an encouragement to all of us and remind us that there's ups and downs, but we're moving forward in this together. And so, Jesus, we eat the bread and dip it in the juice, and we remember your broken body and your shed blood. And we say, thank you, Jesus. Thank you for the victory. Thank you for inviting us into relationship, providing a way to deal with our problem of sin and brokenness, and giving us a new life. We celebrate and we sing together. Amen.